Welcome back then, folks, to the next part of the GT40 build, this time part number 78, first of all, and it seems that through to, what is it, part 82, I think this time, it's mostly engine stuff, if not completely engine stuff, and also some of the rear transaxle setup as well. So, this time around, we've got some of the engine block. I seem to recall we've already done some of this stuff in a recent one as well, because that definitely looks familiar. Got a little piece there, some screws. There we go. So, step one, position the oil filler tube, which is this one, of course, over the right cylinder head. Insert the tube into the corresponding hole. Then turn the cylinder head over and secure the tube with an FP01 screw. Okay, so that one is screwed in there. Position the right cylinder head over the upper right engine block. The cylinder head has two different sized pins, which must be aligned with the corresponding holes to ensure the correct orientation. Attach the head to the upper right engine block by pressing down firmly, and then check the two parts are connected. Okay, turn the assembly over and secure with two FP01s. Now, if we flip over, that is stage complete. So just like that with a simple one, that is stage 78 complete. Now, of course, on to 79. Okay then, so for part number 79, we are continuing with the engine, and for this one, as well as the new parts, which we have here, a bunch of new stuff. Okay, set that to one side. We also will need this piece from a few parts ago, the, what is it, I think left side, I want to say. Yeah, the left side of the engine block that we made a few episodes back. So, step one, position the alternator, 79D, oops, there we go, over the pulley mechanism, 79C, that's a pretty obvious one, and we want to have that, I believe, flipped over that way, and it looks like the alternator is going on to there. Okay, so that one is secured on there. Step two, position the manifolds, bingo, over the pulley mechanism. Okay, so we still need that one. Next to the alternator, insert the pin on the pulley mechanism into the hole in the center of the manifolds as shown. Note the manifolds must be either side of the part of the pulley mechanism that is opposite the alternator. So if we look at our orientation, it looks like we've got it that way. Position the front cover of the engine block, which I believe is here, over the manifolds and the pulley mechanism. Insert the pin on the mechanism into the hole in the front cover and the protrusion on the cover into the hole in the manifolds as shown. Secure all the pieces with two FP01s. So those are attached in, looking good. Set that to one side. As we flip it over, now we need to retrieve this piece. Retrieve the left side, place the mounted assembly in the correct position. After attaching the front cover to the left side, turn the assembly over and secure the parts with one FP01 from the inside of the engine block. So that one just in there. Okay, so insert two FP07s into the two protrusions on the back of the oil sump. Do not over tighten the screws as they'll be used to attach the oil sump to the engine block. Okay, so I'm going to leave those very loosely screwed in, as you should be able to see there. Still a big gap. They're basically only just bedded in, because then you can always take them off easier. And stage complete. So it seems like we're leaving the sump for later on. And there is our completed piece. And with that, that is 79 complete. And now, of course, on to number 80. Okay then, so this time around, in part number 80, we will be retrieving a couple of other things. We've got some new pieces, more of the engine block, got a small hose piece, some more screws as well. It looks like we will be needing to retrieve this from just now, and in a moment we'll be retrieving the entire axle assembly as well that we did last time. Okay, so step one, retrieve the assembly, and it looks like we'll need this as well. Attach the upper right engine block to the right side of the engine block. To ensure the correct orientation, insert the square pin on the center of the upper right engine block into the corresponding hole on the right side of the engine block as shown. Okay, so with those tightened in there, it's coming together nicely. Now, if we set that to one side, screw out the way as well, Turn the assembly over. Yeah, we've done that. Step 3, retrieve the rear axle assembly. Insert the pin end of the hydraulic brake hose. So is that this one? Yep, that's the hose that we've got this time around. So if we get that one out first, insert the pin end of that hose into the hole in the subframe of the rear axle, located just below the right engine mount. Insert the hose by pressing it firmly. So if I grab the axle, I'm not even sure if you'll be able to see it, right in there, a little speck. So that's where we're going. So I'll set that down. I'm going to put the engine block underneath. I'm actually going to do a bit of a cheat again. I did this before, of course, and take this mount back off. Yet again, raising the question of why they said to do it that way around, because this seems to be a recurring theme of having to take that back off. Now, if we try again, have more access. That one is back on there. Certainly a lot easier for getting that little hose in. Okie dokie. Now, if we flip on over, slide the free end of the hydraulic brake hose that we've just fitted into the pin on the outside of the brake caliper that is mounted on the right wheel. Ensure that the hose fully covers the pin. So actually looking at it, this I'd forgotten since last time. So it's basically exactly the same as what we did back when I realised I'd put them on the wrong way around. So if I get that again, bingo. Easy as anything. Retrieve the left side of the engine block. Not that piece, that's this piece with the manifold. And the completed carburetor group. Oh yeah, that's an old school one, which we're getting back now. Okay, so with that little piece back again, this piece of course, retrieve the left side and the carburetor group from installment number 5, so that really is a long way back. Position the engine block over the intake manifold. As shown, join the 2 parts and secure them with 2 FD08 screws. Okay, so those are now attached, looking good. Now, insert the left side of the engine block under the tab on the back face of the left side of the transmission case. So if we move that over there, I believe we're referring to this section here, this tab. Retrieve the oil sump, which we've of course already got as well. With the 2 screws, loosen the screws slightly, position the oil sump under the engine block with the square recess facing the engine, and carefully insert the screws into the semicircular holes on the engine block. Tighten the 2 FP07s gently without forcing them. Seems once again like a pretty poor part of the design when you're trying to tighten screws on that angle and there's literally like no other way of coming through here to tighten it up. So I'm not exactly sure either why they said to line up the engine with the tab first, because this is certainly a lot easier to get the sump on here without doing that. So again, some of the steps occasionally seem to be in a bit of a weird order, like putting these support struts on earlier on. Not exactly sure why they chose to do that so early. Okay, so we've got that there. I need to see exactly what we're going to be doing with this tab first of all. So tighten the screws. It's saying place this onto the tab, but it hasn't said anything about tightening it on the tab. So for now, I'm just going to actually leave it to one side and then retrieve, you know, the placement in a second when we know exactly what we're doing with it, because for now it's just being a bit of a pain that constantly wants to fall off. So slide the right side of the engine block onto the tab. So now it would appear that we're actually doing the tab part. So slide the right back side of the engine block onto the tab and onto the 2 FP07 screws. So I could see this being a lot of fun, and I mean that in the sarcastic sense. Insert the 2 pins on the right engine block into the holes on the left side of the block. So insert the 2 pins on the right engine block. Right, okay. Onto, or into, the holes on the left side of the engine block. Okay, yep, so I can see that. Check that everything is assembled and then secure with 2 FD08s. Well, some screw just fell out and I'm not exactly sure where from. So I'll have to check that in a second. But for now, the engine is at least looking secure. It's locked around the tabs. It feels good. So now I just need to get our... that's what it is again. This annoying piece. Rears its ugly head as we knew it would. So now we need our 2 screws, which are going to be going in there, and those were FD08s. Yet again, the strange choice of having you screw in something straight when there is something in the way. Yet again, just a little bit odd in terms of how they've structured the steps. It's also ironic to me how awkward this one is to get to when these 2 screws are kind of essential, considering all that they're holding together. Aside from losing the drive shaft piece, yet again, as we always seem to, that looks good. Okay, and that is, tentatively, stage complete. So that is a very good looking piece now. There's a whole lot of weight hanging on this section. Feels to me like the nuts need tightening a little bit for the wheels, because there is, again, as I just said, a lot of weight on these. And I've got pins falling out, I've got drive shafts falling off, all of which I predicted, of course, because of the unfortunate stuff last time, or the time before, whenever it was. So I'm going to tidy that up a bit, but for now, that is it for step number 80, and now on to 81. Well, I wasn't really wanting to do this part of the video, but unfortunately it looks like this is the point where we're at, because while taking some aspects apart to put this absolute POS back in, which of course fell out before, this piece of junk which fell out before, this piece of junk which has decided to form them, I'm basically kind of over this, to be honest. I've noticed a couple of times now there have been certain steps, especially around these 2 pieces, wherein it seems like whoever was doing the kit has kind of, I don't know, lost interest or fumbled the ball, or clearly they haven't double checked it enough, because there are certain things now that things are, you know, actually starting to come together, where they're just not really making sense. Like, there is absolutely no reason to have put these black pieces on before. We've already had to take them off twice now to put other things on. Things that I said about just now, like screwing this in when the tyre is clearly in the way. There was absolutely no reason for the wheels to be on at this point. And honestly, I kind of feel like the tyres were getting on, or putting the tyres on at this point, to keep people interested. So that when you can see this and think, oh, that looks good, you feel better about continuing the kit. And since DeAgostini isn't paying me, I'm just going to say it as it is, because that's how I feel at this point. So the reason why I'm annoyed is because while taking this apart, this ridiculously fiddly process of taking apart the pins, this piece of junk, which of course started falling out last time, this one has also fallen out because I noticed for some reason my wheels seem to be wobbling around an awful lot. And it's because these wheels are stripped. Now, you watched me put these wheels in. There was nothing unusual about how I screwed them in. And this piece is what the wheel screws into. Problem is, this piece that the wheel screws into, like that, is attached to what? It's attached to this, which means that when this little pin fails, everything does. So when I took the pin out, or when the pin fell out, I should say, of course, I had to go about putting the wheel back together. Problem is, this wheel no longer screws in place, because when I take this locking nut off and try and screw that screw, which incidentally is a screw that is, you know, specifically designed for this wheel, it does not screw in correctly to this anymore, because look at the condition. I don't even know if you'll be able to see it. I'll try and focus on it. No, I think it's too close. It's stripped. So the screw is not going to stay in there anymore. I've taken these wheels off once, and I'm pretty sure you saw me do it. And it was just to swap them from one side to the other. Not exactly a labour-intensive thing to do. And you've seen numerous times how I screw things in this series. Not exactly like I screw it in with, you know, a power drill or something. I do it exactly as it's said, and it still manages to break. The fact that the pin falls out had nothing to do with how I put the pin in. The pin should have stayed in here. Virtually all of the other pins have stayed in, so why would this one not? Again, it just speaks to these smaller, fiddlier parts of craftsmanship, which I'm just not impressed with, to be honest. I gave it a pass before, because I thought we could probably deal with it and maybe glue it together, but look at this. Not exactly craftsmanship, is it? And I don't really understand how you're supposed to move this around and work on it without stuff like this beginning to happen. When you've got this much weight, because for those of you who can't tell, This is a significant amount of weight. So to have all of that sitting on one tiny little screw, a screw which incidentally I've had to change out because the screw would not screw into this anymore. So I've had to essentially retrofit it because this tiny screw that was supposed to be in there, look how deep that screw isn't. That is supposed to attach that wheel to this. And as I said, that is then attached to the drive shaft, and everything here, all of that weight, I'll retrieve that in a second, all of this weight and all of this pressure on said weight is on that. That is a bad design. I don't care if that's realistic. There are certain corners that you have to cut. There are certain things that you have to change when making something on a model scale, because this does not have the same proportional strength that the real car's piece would have. If it is assembled in the exact same way, down to every nut and bolt, which of course it isn't anyway, but if it were, you would have to make some concessions, because that just is not viable. And this process has shown that this isn't viable. Now, I'm sure there are some people who are thinking, well, you're just being a crybaby about it, should have done it better, blah, blah, blah. Whatever. I'm sure other people have done it. Of course, other people have done it and had no issues. But you could say that about buying a real car. Even real cars can have their issues. So this clearly was a defective piece. I take great issue with the fact that this doesn't have any replacements. None, not a single one of these pins so far has had a replacement. We've had twice as many screws through the entire thing as we've ever needed, and never used any of those bonuses, at least in my case. This is the kind of thing that you actually needed a replacement for, and we don't have it. So that bugs me, because to me, that is a bad design. That is a bad idea from this planning perspective. And as well as things like having to take these off numerous times to get hoses in, the fact that you can't screw the engine in properly because a literal entire wheel and tyre is in the way when there was absolutely no reason. Look at this, for example. There is no disadvantage to not having a tyre on this side. In fact, let's say it as it is, this is way better to put the engine together when there isn't a big fat-ass tyre in your face when you're trying to work on the engine. This is very poorly planned, or at least that comes off that way. Initially, when all the individual pieces were being made, it seemed okay. But to be honest, this time around, I'm not impressed, because now that we're getting to put these things together, the order in which it's being done just screams that it hasn't been planned properly. And that's disappointing to me, because clearly a lot of love has gone into making these things. And on the individual planning stages, putting the wheels together, getting the tyre on, this kind of stuff is done well. But clearly, whoever planned how to manufacture these things and whoever planned how these go together, they weren't talking, because it doesn't make sense. And it's really beginning now to fall apart, where you can see these parts coming together. Because again, whoever thought that it was a good idea to have to put two parts of an engine together, with this piece on the top, putting the sump on the bottom, because all of this is on this weight. Everything is hanging off of a couple of tiny ass screws of this size, and then they expect that to not end up like this. I'm not impressed. And if that means that I don't get any more delivered, and if that means that I don't do any more of the series, then maybe that's where it'll have to end. And I've always tried to be very patient with this process, because it's very fiddly, it's very small, there are lots of things which could easily break, so you have to treat it with that kind of respect. You've seen the respect that I've treated these things with. These kind of pins especially, I've been very meticulous about doing it. You can see that this pin, even though it's fallen out, has no damage to it whatsoever. It's not bent, it's not scratched, it hasn't been modified, I haven't bent it or anything to try and make it stay in. I've done exactly what it said in the step-by-step process, and now it's literally falling apart. Aside from literally gluing everything together to keep all of these pins in, stuff like this, forget it. Stuff like the drive shafts is never going to be fixed. It just is not going to. You can't glue stuff together that is supposed to have rotational motion. And you can't expect this kind of weight. This entire thing weighs, what, 8 kilos? 8 kilos of metal, rubber, and plastic being held together by this? These aren't car-sized bolts and nuts. They cannot support that kind of weight. And whoever designed it thinking that it could, clearly didn't stress test this well enough, because this isn't even fully put together. And it still can't even just handle being moved around to be put together. Yeah, I'm at a bit of an impasse right now, because I you know, aside from personal feelings and aside from my feelings, you know, put everything I've said about the process to one side, even if you fully support how it was put together, I don't see how I can continue. Because even if I wanted to, the pins don't hold. The screws are stripped somehow. I don't even understand how, because I put them on, realised they were on the wrong side, so I swapped them, and that's literally it. Nothing else has been changed. If a screw can't handle being taken in and out once, when it was done methodically and carefully, then how am I supposed to continue at that point? So if that does end up being the end, then it's going to be a shame, kind of a fizzle of an end, but I guess we'll have to see. I'll have a bit of a brainstorm about it, and I'm definitely open to suggestions down in the comments, but aside from glue, I don't really see what other options I have. And yeah, so sorry about that, but that's it for this episode, I guess. And that's kind of it for step 80, because we were technically completed. We were technically finished with part 80 because the engine is together. It's just that I'd put the engine together, got the sump on. As you can see, it's all together. But then the wheel decided to fall off and it all went south from there. So that's it. See you next time, or maybe not.